All right, how's it going, everybody? Hope you're enjoying your day. Just grabbing something on lunch here. It's something I've been thinking about doing for a while, and I just really haven't, I guess, committed to it necessarily. I don't know. I'm kind of experimenting. I'm curious to see how today goes. I know we've started doing, or we're going to be doing some trainings and stuff for my company over like lunch webinars, but I've been toying with the idea of just doing some live streams over lunch, just something to get more engagement more directly. My life personally at home gotten crazy, whatever. Y'all aren't really here for that, or maybe some of you are. But so some common questions I get. Probably one of the biggest ones is, am I hiring, or you want to work with me, or something to that degree. I do want to just kind of get a blanket statement out there. I am in Austin, Texas, here in the United States. You do, for the company I'm with, you're required to be you have to have legal work status in tech or in the United States. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but like work visa, just have legal status to work here. And you need to have some kind of background. Now, in terms of actual positions open, one thing I will say is I do have in-house apprenticeship that I am looking for candidates for, and that apprenticeship has kind of two levels to it. So one level is for guys who are true fresh apprentices who have absolutely no experience, and you can get in straight out of school. A lot of the guys we hire in as apprentices that way are fresh from school, and we help build them into commercial or heavy commercial service technicians, right? And we're non-union, so that's the other piece of it. If you plan to do this, or if you're serious about that conversation, we are a non-union company. So the union has their own apprenticeship, and honestly it's a good system from what I've heard. I have no personal experience with it, but I've got some good people that did go that path, and I've gotten to learn a lot about it in the last couple of years. How's it going, everybody? I see you coming through the chat. If you have any questions, it's a great time. I'm just kind of here to chat today, kind of follow up, maybe go through some comments if we get time, and I'm here to hang out. Nothing special on the agenda, so if you want to hang out over lunch and chat, here you go. So anyway. So if you're interested in the apprenticeship, or maybe you've got a couple of years, maybe you've got some residential experience and you want to get into the heavy commercial side or start working this direction, then feel free, go to our company's website at aps-centraltx.com, and you should be able to put your application in there, or you can just email me directly at my HVAC time email. Both of those will get your resume in front of me and my supervisor team, and we'll be able to evaluate you further from there. So if you're interested in that, in terms of actual technicians, I will be looking at hiring more technicians throughout the year, but I'm not in a hard place like I've got to have guys right now. We've actually got some really good hires, and some of you may know, Jason Johnson. He's in the chat all the time. He was somebody we picked up, moved him down here last year, and yeah, it's been a fantastic addition to our team. Really, really glad to have him on board. So that's the thing we do. So if you're wanting to work with me, that is just some basic parameters to go with. So one question, how many journeymen do we have working? I would classify a journeyman as our Tech 2s and Tech 3s. And we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8, what I would consider a journeyman. And then we have some entry-level technicians that I wouldn't quite put a journeyman title to, but they're definitely working their way into it. And then we have our apprentice side. I appreciate that from the Gulf there. So getting into, let's hit some comments. Actually, before we dive into that, I do want to let you know, in case y'all don't know, I'd be surprised, but TrueTech Tools. I really suggest, they're not sponsoring this or nothing, but up front, I do get a commission from working with them. And, so they have the promo code HVAC time is 8% off. So if you're ever looking at purchasing anything through them, that'll get you a little bit off the order. That does give a kickback to me as well. So I'll throw that out there up front. But genuinely, they're a fantastic company. They're great people. If you're going to buy stuff online, you can get legitimate quality, good service through good people. I would highly suggest, talking to them at minimum. So that's TrueTech Tools. In addition to that, there is still some room, for my tech support side of things. So if you aren't familiar, hvactimetx.com, for anybody that's looking for more, just some kind of tech support or troubleshooting. I get to it when I can. It does have to revolve around my actual working schedule. So, I have to bear that in mind. But whether it be through like Instagram Messenger or an email, I can try to get you what support you can. We just had some guys last week, and a lot of the stuff, sometimes it's just simple little things, right? Some guys had a VSD they were having trouble with. They did a rebuild on it off of a YCAV, I think it was. And it was two wires that got switched when they, actually it was funny story. They had to rebuild the VSD, and when they rebuilt it, somebody that had worked on it prior to them had crossed two of the leads for the trigger board to monitor the DC bus. And so they put it back together exactly the way it was, but the DC bus wasn't registering properly. So that's what it came down to, and what kind of triggered me to understand what they were dealing with is, one, the DC bus wouldn't register voltage at the chiller display, and then two, the bus wasn't bleeding down properly. And so sure enough, they found that they were reading, I think, the negative side with both of the pickup wires. Just move one of the wires over to the positive side. Everything was corrected, right? So sometimes it's just little things like that, and it's getting a third perspective to just give it a little input goes a long way. I know it's done me a lot of good. So one question we got is, can you explain how the ambient temperature affects the air-cooled condenser subcooling with the TXV? So the ambient conditions aren't going, or you can only cool the condenser as low, or you can only cool the liquid line, the liquid line as low as the outside ambient is, because we're using ambient air to cool the condenser to begin with. So with the metering device, in my opinion, I think has less to do with it. Now, it's not so dependent on whether it's TXV or EXV or even a fixed bore, that how they function are different. Anyway, what really impacts subcooling the most is, can you properly exchange heat? So is your fan motor working correctly? Is your coil in proper condition? Do you have any restrictions? And is there any kind of oil logging in the condenser? So those are some things that can affect the transfer rate of the refrigerant. So if all of those things are in order, then the indoor ambient load has the most to do with your subcooling, especially with newer systems, because the lower the load is inside, the lower your condenser saturation is going to be, because it has to reject less heat, right? So to reject more heat, we have to raise the condenser saturation above ambient higher to get a faster rate of transfer. And that will lead to also showing a higher subcooling based off of your load conditions. That's why it's really important when you're doing a system charge that you do the final piece of the charge when your return air is about what it's like, within a degree or two of what it's actually going to be long term. So if you're charging a system and you have a really high ambient or a really high return load that's higher than it normally would be, it's very easily, or even lower than it normally would be. It's easy to mischarge a system because you're not actually within the normal load parameters that you're going to be on a typical basis. And hopefully that's not too complicated of an answer, but anyway, CGAM temp sensor issues all were replaced a year ago. Temp beginning to read a few degrees off. Conductive paste on the sensors. Do you do anything with the electrical? Honestly, we have similar issues. So those trained sensors, which being a CGAM is going to be the communicating style. Those sensors just they fail all the time. Whether it's a air cooled CGAM or not, or if it's a centrifugal, we constantly go through those sensors. So as far as I'm concerned, Train just has issues with those sensors. Personal opinion. Let's see. Rapid acting. Let's see. Not sure. Can you elaborate on what you're trying to point out there? Anyway, I'm going to move on real quick. So where do you get your training on the various chillers? Do you work for the military? I do not work for the military, nor have I. I could get I come from a military family. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this. So no, I don't work. So the training I get, I've been through several factory trainings on various types of equipment, and that's something that I try to keep up with, and that's a benefit that the company I'm with offers to us, is sending us to these classes when it's appropriate. But a lot of it has a lot of what I've picked up is what I've had to really learn in the field, and then talking to the right people. Now, I haven't had that many senior people that I could look to, mostly because I'm a part of the generation that was cycling in as those seniors are cycling out. And I just didn't have access to that many guys who were willing to discuss it with me. So I have been able to find one or two that were willing to have that conversation, but a lot of it came down to really studying the equipment, applying myself when I had the opportunity, and just deep diving the heck out of the manuals that I could get my hands on. So you would be surprised how much you can learn about these systems strictly based off of the IOMs. The challenging part to a lot of chiller IOMs, and I'm actually working on some solutions for this on my side, but they're not written in like everyday language that you would imagine pick up a book and read. In my opinion, I mean, they're written dang near like a freaking scholar would write, and so it can be really challenging to interpret some of the things they talk about. So that's just, anyway, that's where a lot of it is field experience. I've learned enough about enough machines to where I can walk up to a machine I might not have seen before, but the same fundamentals still apply despite the machine in that way. What becomes different, maybe some key like specifics on what they're looking for, what they call good or bad. Hopefully that gives you something to work with. While working heavy commercial, shorten your career due to lifting heavy weights. It can, if you do not apply good practice or procedures. So we use a lot of rigging, and we also we take how we lift things very, very seriously. So this is a conversation that happens in this industry as in general. That's one of the downsides that I can acknowledge about air conditioning. And I see this whether you're a residential guy, a light commercial guy, or a heavy commercial industrial. The industry really wears into your body because residential guys, you're having to lift stuff, but you're working in some really horrible situations a lot of the time, honestly, in those roofs, and that takes a serious toll on you. And I started off residential, and I just it's rough. And then on the commercial side, you're dealing with a lot of heavier stuff. And so what I recommend to really just about anybody, learn good rigging practices, and as a company, or really encourage your leadership to invest in rigging equipment. If not, invest into it yourself. Now, it's expensive, but we have rules in our team where if it's above 15 ton, not tons, I'm sorry, if it's above horse, is it 10? It's either 10 horse or 15 horse. I think it's a 10 horse. Anything more than 10 horse, we do not deadlift ourselves. We get some kind of rigging, or we get multiple people to lift that. And by the time you hit 20 horse, even two guys trying to lift a 20 horse motor, just that's not safe nor realistic. You need to get some kind of chain fall, gantry, and rig equipment in there to safely do that. I'd really encourage you to develop that in your skill sets. What happens if the makeup water unit is dead for a month on air-cooled chiller plant? Makeup water unit. So, as in a unit that is pre-treating makeup water into like there's a couple of designs that I'm aware of, so I may need a little more detail there. So, do you have like a storage system, and part of that storage system is you have a makeup that feeds that to keep up with any water that's in there, or glycol, or are you referring to like an actual pressure regulator where we're maintaining flow into a loop? I would like a little more detail on exactly this type of system, because I could go a couple of directions with that, honestly. See, everything, all I could get from Train was the new sensors are better. Oh, so yeah, Train has started switching to a different style of sensor, but even with the new style sensors, one, they don't fit in the old wells very well. The rubber jacket on them always gives me trouble. But two, I haven't seen that much of a difference. I still have failures on the new style almost as much as I did the older style. I think Train's just, I don't know. They just fail. They go bad a lot. I've just kind of accepted it myself, honestly. But I appreciate that. Some of these, I'm really terrible about pronouncing things. So I'm nervous to start because I don't want to insult nobody. Let's see, where were you scared when you got into HVAC, and why or why not? I wasn't necessarily scared when I got started in HVAC because of ignorance, and I was working for people who, honestly, they had no idea what they were doing. I posted that picture of the beer can cold graphic on the channel the other day, and I appreciate the guy that sent that to me. Freaking hilarious. But that was actually, like, I was brought up that way, and so out of ignorance, I just didn't know to be scared, I guess. But I did really get nervous whenever I started doing a lot of work on my own. And when I can say I got, it was really challenging for me when I got into the commercial side. So I started off doing light commercial and kitchen and restaurant work, doing walk-in boxes, and the pressure of, like, I got to fix this. And it wasn't something that I had somebody to actively train me on it. I was very much just kind of thrown into it, and I had to sink or swim when I got into doing it. So it was actually doing that work that I really struggled, but I figured it out. That job was the one that really taught me the importance of studying manuals, and that was really how I started to get past that. And in studying those manuals and then having situations I couldn't explain why this was happening, it eventually, like a capacitor, I couldn't explain or understand why the capacitor had such a significant role in the system. But in trying to get better at this career, that's what made me decide to go to school. Now from there, I did step into the heavy commercial side, and like centrifugal chillers. When I first walked up to them, they're intimidating as hell, because the very first ones I started working on were like 1,500. They were 1,000 or 1,500 ton machines, so they were really decent size for the heavy commercial comfort cooling side. Industrial guys would kind of chuckle at that, but you know, it was extremely intimidating. But what I did was I took it slow, and I applied a similar practice that I did when I got into doing the walk-in work and the ice machines. Is I started to read and study and just really become a student of that machine. And through that process, I eventually started to get just a little bit of comforts. And that's something that I really encourage you. You know, don't try to take on too much when you're trying to learn stuff in this industry. Develop each skill as you go. And if you do that, you can get good at little things over time and actually get good at them instead of struggling with a whole bunch of things for a long time. You can just get good at little things, and then you may struggle with the rest of it, but as eventually all those little things turn into, you're actually pretty good with most things now. I would highly encourage that approach, but it can be a lot. It can be a lot. I know the sensors are crap, just trying to get as much life out of them as possible. Yeah, I wish I had better suggestions for you. Yeah, it is a thing. What's up, Archer? Mr. Sterling. I forgot to ask last time. Any book recommendations as far as airflow and psychrometrics? No, honestly, I don't. You just like from all of my background, short of I guess the regular books that we all get recommended in school, which granted, Sterling, I get that. I don't know what y'all have over there in Europe, but the air conditioning or the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning technologies book, I think is what it's called, or whatever edition they're on now. Just the standard book if you go through almost any school program they have you buy. A lot of what you need to know is in that book. I don't have anything outside of that, if that helps. Let's see, do you have a choice for a Schrader core brand color? No, I don't. Honestly, I don't have a preference. Just kind of, yeah, you have to make sure you get the right one because the seals are different depending on the refrigerant. That was a fun kind of hiccup to learn the hard way. When we really started working on a lot more 410A, not all of us knew that. So, yeah, no actual preference on that. See, the pressurization unit and makeup water feed pump had been dead when I got the new project. The pressure vessel had no pressure. It's an RTAD train. Okay, so let me go back to the original questions. What happens? It's dead for a month. Well, I mean, yeah, so if you start bleeding down on pressure like that, you're going to start dropping GPM. And when you start dropping it's like losing airflow on any system, right? You walk up to an RTU and you throw a dirty filter in it, or you choke down on the ducts real bad and you choke the thing off. I mean, it can't breathe, so you're not going to have much heat exchange, and that's going to cause superheat issues and everything else. Well, the same thing on the hydronic side. You start running out of pressure, because you got to think too. You can also start cavitating your water. So depending on how many, because water stacks in pipe with feet of head above it. So depending on how many, how tall your loop is, whether it's 1 story, 2 stories, however many stories, that water creates head pressure. So if you run at the lowest point I recommend at my lowest level having, at my highest level, at my highest level in the loop, at the very top of it, I recommend running 8 to 10 psi there. Because if you can maintain 8 to 10 psi at the top of the loop, then you have enough water to circulate that entire loop, or you should, for most applications. You know, obviously there's always going to be the one-offs. So what can happen is the top of that loop, as that pressure begins to drain down, you end up having air stack. And even though air is in the system, okay, but it's inside the fluid in the water. So if you're losing water pressure, then that air can start to cavitate at the pump, and then it's going to get trapped in the high points of the system, even though literal air wasn't introduced into the system, and that'll cause flow issues, and you can end up vapor locking the whole loop that way. So that could turn into a nasty situation real quick. Let's see, on another topic, a few more minutes here, guys. I really love the engagement here. I appreciate everybody in the chat. The most experienced tech at my company keeps telling me there's no way you can freeze break a DX evap by recovering the charge without water flowing. I'm not buying it though. So I'm assuming this is on a chiller. See, he keeps that. So there's no way you can freeze or break a DX evap. A DX. Okay, so DX means the water is, the water is on the outside of the pipes and the refrigerant's inside the pipes. I would agree, because you got to think the refrigerant is what's inside the pipes, and you can create some freezing, but what you create is, and this is not a tube and tube. This is a shell and tube DX. So the water on the shell side will just kind of create an ice film. Now it will slow down your recovery process, or not charging, but your recovery process, because having that flowing water helps add heat to the refrigerant that's in the evaporator, and it will help it drain down, or it'll help you recover it faster by flowing water. But no, you won't necessarily you won't have a water rupture, because the water is on the outside of the tubes, and so it's when the water is inside the tubes that you can freeze all that water, and then that water can freeze so hard that when it freezes, it expands, bulges the tube out until it just busts open, because those tubes are thinner than piping would be anyway for better heat exchange. So that's my feedback there. I guess I agree with him. On a DX, yeah, I guess I would agree with it. You're not going to freeze on a DX where the refrigerant's in the tube. Do you see the U.S. going the VRV way and away from chillers? Here in Europe, we're going away from VRV and back to central plant and fan coils. And actually, this is a fascinating conversation. And I actually did a podcast on this. I forget what episode it was, but you can. I think there's a middle ground, and as part of the points I was making in the podcast is there's a lot of applications that VRV makes a lot of sense for. The problem with VRV is people don't know how, or they're not willing to take the steps necessary to work on it properly. So it has a tremendous amount of issues, and you have a lot of low-end companies trying to get into the VRV market, and it doesn't work. That is premium type equipment, and it requires the hardware to support that. So when you use subpar components in a system like that, it's going to have extreme failures. So that is the balancing act we're seeing right now, is we did swing a little, we started to swing a little too heavy to the VRV, and we still are kind of in that process. I think Europe is a bit ahead of us in this scale because y'all have already walked this road, and the US is just a few years behind you in walking this road. We're still going to have chiller plants, and there's a lot of people who firmly believe that VRVs are not going to die, but they're a temporary fad that has hit the energy market in the right way. But from a service perspective and the amount of skill that's required to work on those is almost equivalent, not completely, but very equivalent to the chiller side. But the chillers are so much more robust in what they can do that it become long-term. It is a better investment on the hydronics than it is the VRV. And that is what a lot of companies are beginning to realize. For the companies that are what would be considered, value engineering, they're just looking for the cheapest turnover and get the hell out. Their VRVs are perfect for them because it doesn't matter what the long-term repercussions are. They're just looking to get in, get their money, and disappear. It is the people who are looking for the long-term investments because they plan to long-term invest that they're seeing the value of staying hydronic over VRF. I'm working on an Aeon RTU, and the digital compressor doesn't load and unload. When I hooked up the system, all test points are being met. Supply set point 55 with 35% humidity. Is priority setup 60 on RH. So the compressor won't load or unload. So if are you meeting supplier set point is my question. And are you, is one of your reheat valves possibly stuck, causing that low of a relative? Because 35% is really low. And so, those three-way reheat valves can sometimes get they won't slide properly. And you may be dehumidifying when you shouldn't be. Yeah. What's your actual, is that 55 and 35% your actual supply? Because I see it's your set point. Yeah. See, Train has bought a company that makes water heat pumps. Yeah, we've got water source heat pumps all over the place. It's very common, and they are like Mitsubishi, for example. This is something we've gotten into is Mitsubishi is making water source VRFs. So we're able to put the water source condensers into mechanical rooms with a cooling tower. We have started working on those, and pretty interesting systems. All right. Well, hey, shoot. The chat alone kept that conversation buzzing. I'm going to wrap it up here. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Hope y'all enjoyed today. Enjoy your week. Have a good one. We've got some good stuff. I've got a video ready for Friday. Having the editor come on board has made a big difference. Really appreciate his time, and it's gonna make it to where I can much more consistently do some of this stuff. So I appreciate y'all's support. It is because of the support everybody provides that makes it possible for me to get other people involved to keep this thing going and make it what it is. I do want to give a shout out to Craig, and I'm not gonna, just insult his last name, with AC Service Tech LLC. I highly recommend you guys, pay attention to what he's got going. He just is either released or is releasing a inverter troubleshooting book. A mini split troubleshooting book alongside his service procedures book he already had. And he does some really great stuff, and he really specializes in the residential and the light commercial side of things. But you know, a lot of the stuff he talks about and many of the principles and even some of the troubleshooting procedures translate really well. And I really appreciate some of the stuff he's getting out there. So I'd heavily encourage you, even if you're a commercial guy, you know, give him some attention. He's doing some great stuff. He really is. I appreciate the amount of energy he's putting into this industry. With that, appreciate everybody. Thank you for all the thank yous. I'll see you later.